Welcome to Hort Culture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. It brought me so much joy the other day when I wasn't thinking and somebody came to the door, a friend of mine, and so I just stepped out on the porch. And I said, I got to go grab something out of the barn. You want to come with me? She said, yeah. So we walk out to the barn and I was halfway there before I realized I don't have shoes on and my feet aren't cold. And how nice was that? Because the grass was touching my feet and I was like, it's so pleasant outside. And
You're like a plant. You're hardened off. Your feet, maybe your feet are just hardened off, Alexis. Maybe they are. Is that it? Or it's just pleasant outside?
No, it was just one of those beautiful spring days and I got to touch grass and I didn't even have to think about the fact that I need to put shoes or socks on. And it was such a lovely, lovely minute that I just had to share it.
I will snow again soon. I mean, don't worry, Alexis.
Earlier in my life, I would be in travel places and stuff and meet people, and I would say I'm from Kentucky. And one of the stereotypes for Kentucky, of course, is that we don't wear shoes.
Yeah.
And that, or don't have teeth or whatever, any number of things. And I do have all of my teeth plus a couple of my wisdom teeth even. But I did nothing to break that stereotype, particularly when I was younger. I didn't wear shoes. To not wear shoes at all.
I hated shoes growing up. I hated them.
And now I feel like my feet are more sensitive or something. Like if I'm walking on grass, it's cool. But there was a time where
there was a pride. If I could walk across gravel without shoes on, I was like, there's so much pride for me in that. And
gravel is different than gravel.
I think I just wear shoes more with farming. Like you gotta wear, you shouldn't till barefoot, everybody. So
not till through no glass patch or rusty nails. I mean, tetanus is a thing. Yeah.
I used to be one too many times,
Have a little reaction. Don't have your EpiPen. Just whatever.
Yeah.
Now feel free to step on a yellow-legged hornet. It may hurt.
Yeah, I was going to say, according to our apiarist, they have pretty intense stings. So I might
If you have not listened to our previous episode with Amanda Skidmore, go back and do that. It's really interesting and emergent thing. But from my perspective, to quote Patrick Swayze, pain don't hurt.
Pain don't hurt. Is that a Roadhouse quote? I can't remember.
That's from Roadhouse.
It hurts me. So yes, hi, hello. You know what else hurts me? When my cuttings die.
That's hurtful. Is that like the song When the Doves Die, except with cuttings, when the cuttings die?
I could imagine I would feel that way if I didn't have a 100% success rate.
Yeah. Wow. See, Brett knows no failure.
Okay.
So he does not know the pain.
In the horticulture world, usually we think that means you don't start enough. So
I could see how weaker women and men might think that about me, but
maybe you just need to try weirder things.
That's a joke. I have a very low success rate.
No, if you get rid of all the dead ones, Brett, and only keep the living, that's 100% of what you have in front of you.
Of the ones that survive, 100% of them survive.
It just depends on your sample group.
The ones that are actually
specific here.
Yeah, it's not my fault that they didn't have it in them. They didn't have that dog in them.
I have to say,
they're quitters.
Taking cuttings, I love starting seeds. Taking cuttings of any kind is probably one of my favorite things to do.
It's a different thing, taking cuttings, because you give plants, immortality with cuttings. I mean, because you're taking a clone and just making new.
God.
Yes, what is it, Dolly the sheep several years ago? When we first started talking about genetics and the accessibility, cloning things. Yeah. Yeah, several a long time ago.
I was a child.
And now you can, get that kit on eBay. You can purchase it cheap. I'm not advocating for that, but you can take plants, and that's one thing I love about it, Alexis. That's different than seeds, right? Seeds are like a genetic cross of parentage, but not cuttings. That's so that's always been so cool to me. Yeah, it's such a cool thing.
Yeah, it's more, some cuttings take a long time. We'll kind of talk about the different ones here in a second. But for a lot of cuttings, I think there's a little bit more from a relative speaking in the plant world, almost like instant satisfaction, right? Because you get this kind of like, you're taking it from, an adult plant and it's already got like leaves on it, and you're forcing the roots, versus with a seed, you're getting the root first, you're getting this underground part you can't see, and then you're going to get this. So it's just a different vibe. And I love it. I take a lot of cuttings in the springtime of mostly herbaceous stuff, just really, like fleshy, succulent things, not necessarily woody items. But I love it so much. And I check on them probably too much. I'm a little bit of a helicopter mom. I'm like, how you doing? Did you get any roots today? What about now? What about now? What about now?
Like giving a little tug test every week, and you're like, it slips up. You're like, oh,
twice a day, and I'm making it worse.
Anchored. Yeah. I was always the one, I'd pull it up, it'd slip up, and I'm like, dang it, put it back in. And give it 5 more days. Yeah.
Once you learn that doesn't really bother them any, you'll do it all the time.
No,
so
it's fine.
So I'm a little newer to the cutting game than you two are. So as I understand it, there are different kinds of cuttings that are taken from different types of plants at different times of year. And so our thought is, I think we're going to do a series of episodes on different propagation types, so we can focus on specific ones. So at a high level, what are those types of cuttings that we're talking about? And you mentioned herbaceous, and I think of herbaceous as stuff that like dies back to the ground every year, as opposed to having a woody structure that it grows from again, in case anybody's not familiar with that. So can you orient me and teach me how to be like you guys?
Yeah, there's technically a lot, but I think the big three to think about is, your herbaceous or cuttings, like you said, they die back to the ground, or these are the ones that your stems stay green, right? And they stay easy to cut with snips. You don't need pruners necessarily. These are easy to cut. You've got semi hardwood or softwood cuttings, and then you've got hardwood cuttings, and those are exactly what they sound like. So thinking about some of our shrubs where they're technically woody, like the stems will be brown, but you can bend them pretty easy, if that makes sense. So Wagelia are an example of that one, 9 bark, things like that, where they have kind of these flexible but woody brown stems. And then you've got hardwoods, which are going to be more along the lines of your trees and these, woody stems that are not super
low
flexible.
Energy kind of stuff, because they're dormant, aren't they?
Yeah, and like you can get softwood cuttings off of trees. So that's like kind of the hard part. I don't want to categorize you too much. You get it in your brain. It's more about the type of wood that you are taking and the time of year you're taking it. But those are the big ones. I mean,
can you take softwood and hardwood cuttings from the same plant, like the same type of like? It just depends on.
Produces hardwood, yes.
Right. Okay, so it's not like all hardwood cuttings come from hardwood plants.
Trees.
It's
that you can do different. Okay, well that's
like I had a botany professional. They said, well, the only difference is timing when you do it and the age of the wood. Whether it's first year growth or older growth, and he always called, and it was interesting. Alexis, you might be able to shed some more light on this. He called hardwood cuttings low energy cuttings, and then softwood was high energy cuttings, and he talked a lot about that and the importance of that. Where hardwood's more of a dormant process, hardwood cuttings, and softwood, which we're talking mostly about today, is more of a high energy. And I didn't appreciate that enough until I failed lots because that's one of the things that's a great thing about softwood cuttings, but it's also one of the challenges we can talk about is they've already broken dormancy, they're growing, so you have to manage them.
So when you're saying high energy and low energy, you're referring to like sort of the amount of energy and movement and
the metabolism within the plant and the stage of growth that plant's at that time. Yeah.
Because it's like I think about like the cycle of the year, and when you have this initial push of all this greenery and flowers and everything else in springtime, and then that humming green, everything's flowing, everything's happening in the middle of summer. And then he starts to slow down and it goes into dormancy, and they look dead. Obviously they're not dead. They're just really like cryogenically frozen. They're in like a really slow rate.
Taking a little nap.
activity. And so so that's what you're saying, is that
yes,
you're taking them at a higher energy time of year when stuff's humming along.
yeah, they're moving and growing and doing things, and you got to account for that. Because another big difference is one, it has a presence of leaves and one doesn't. That's another big. I mean that, but that plays into the high energy. If it has leaves on it, and all of a sudden you separate it from the parent plant, you have to treat it a certain way and manage it a certain way, or it's not going to be successful.
And so,
because leaves give off, I guess.
Which one of these are we talking about today?
Softwood.
Softwood.
Softwood cuttings.
We won't
because
confuse
it's the time
the
of
conversation.
Year, you can start thinking about doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna late March. People are hearing this in late March into April, May, June.
I'd say May. The first 2 weeks in May is like prime time for a lot of this stuff, depending on the year. Like beginning of May, the first to second week is like go time. But you started to make some good comments, Alexis, about how do you tell like when softwood is at just the right stage. And I heard you talk about the snap test or whatever. Didn't you mention that as far as
and
timing?
There's also to play in whether or not it blooms in the spring. So, and you do have a bigger window with softwood cuttings because basically you just want those green leaves to be out and still, not this super hard wood. You want like a very flexible new growth. So this growth is going to be, kind of like this year's growth. You want full leaves out. And if it's something like, for example, I was just looking in preparation for this episode of some softwood cuttings I took of flowering almond and a Weigela last year. And, I put my dates on there so that I remember, and I was proud of myself for doing that. But I didn't take those till the beginning of June, and that's because they flower in the spring. And so you're going to take those after flowering is ideal. You can take them before flowering if they have enough leaves on them, which often if they're a spring bloomer, they're not going to have a ton of leaves on them yet. But you have to like rub off those flowers.
Yeah, if you see that big terminal swollen bud, it's like you got to get rid of that. And I never was really good at paying attention to that. And that's something to watch out for. Yeah.
So taking them after bloom is great if it's a spring bloomer. If it doesn't bloom till later in the summer, some of our hydrangea species and stuff like that are later bloomers, fall bloomers. You can take those softwood cuttings in the spring. That
kind of explains for me. I never thought about it, but I mean the window for me is like the first part of May all the way through July. But based on what you just said, that kind of makes sense because some of them you can do in June and July, and it's still not differentiating into like that ligneous hardwood, like that real. It's not gotten real woody. So that kind of makes sense. I never thought about it in those terms. But yeah, the window for some plants is really broad, like, May, June, and July.
Hardwood is a little bit different, and we'll talk about that closer to the time when you'll take hardwood cuttings where, acting like we're timing these perfectly, right? So we'll talk about those later if you're interested. But yeah, so softwood cuttings, those herbaceous ones first. Let's get those out of the way. Those herbaceous ones where you're going to take where that stem stays green, that plant maybe dies down to the ground. If it's an annual, you can take cuttings of it over and over. It just stays green and flexible. Those you can take at any point in the year. The caveat is if you take it when there is low light levels, you are going to need to supplement light or you won't get good rooting happening. So you'll have a lot of death. There's just, it's most predominantly
a
light.
Lot of death.
A lot of
death.
Brett is unaccustomed with failure in that area.
We're just horticulturists. We talk a lot about death, actually.
We do.
Yeah. So you can take those any time of the year, but I tend to, if I have the flexibility, I tend to wait until after the first of the year to do that because we get that light. It's returning right after winter solstice. The beginning of February is kind of ideal. You get rid of the Persephone period is what they call that. And we start to really get those long days. And you will find that the rooting is, twice, if not more, faster during that period of time. And so those later taken cuttings will catch up to the ones you did earlier during low light. Now you can supplement those with light if you want to do your tropical house plants because, they're too big or you want a bunch more that you can give away. You can do those inside under lights, but I would encourage you to wait and do them because you'll have more luck and those plants will catch up. So those kind of
on that herbaceous stuff. So you're saying that you're going to do this in February.
Mhm.
Well, nothing's growing out of the ground for me yet in February. So
Mhm.
this is like that you have a mother
Mother
plant in
plants.
the
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like we're talking
greenhouse,
about like
Mhm.
greenhouse type stuff,
and
it
you're
sounds
taking
like,
cuttings
yeah.
off of it and
Mhm.
rooting those, not
Yes,
not
yeah,
like
thank you.
taking cuttings from a baptisia that's coming up out of the ground or something.
Right, right, right,
Okay.
right. Yep,
Okay,
yep,
cool.
yep. So,
Perfect.
so yeah, mother plants, house plants, anything that's green and foliage. And
Yeah.
then you can take those, when your stuff does come up, if you want to take cuttings of that, you can take that pretty much any time during the year. So as long as you've got high light levels, you can take those.
Side
So,
note, the mother plant thing is so cool. It's such I didn't ever know about it until somewhat recently that, you have this plant that has the characteristics that you really love and want. It could be the foliage color or size or what. It's a big deal in bonsai because you want things that
mm,
have smaller foliage patterns. And so if you
mhm,
get
mhm,
one, back to Ray's point, you're literally copy pasting it. You're
mhm.
cloning this thing that will have the same genetic characteristics. And so you'll have these plants, which is I just find really culturally cool that you have this plant that you keep for years and years and years that you're cutting stuff off of. It starts looking
Hack.
weird because it's,
Yeah.
getting snipped here and there, but it's like got all this very cool natural energy. It's produced all of these clones across this whole period of time. It's some pretty cool stuff. So anyway, so you got
I
a mother
love it.
plant. You're doing that for the
Yep.
herbaceous stuff.
Mhm. Yeah.
Softwoods are around the corner.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
coming on.
herbaceous, relatively simple, straightforward. And I would say herbaceous and softwood, like when we talk about the actual, like the physical of the cutting or the type of cutting we take and the treatment, to get it to root, they're going to be pretty similar. For the most part, you might use a stronger hormone to induce rooting, but it's going to be the same. So if you can do one, you can definitely do the other.
You'd
You
use
just
a
got to have
stronger hormone for which one?
for the you could possibly need a stronger hormone for the softwood cuttings because it's
Yeah.
just a heavier duty plant cutting.
Mhm. Yeah.
So you're trying to force it, and then there's a whole nother harder set for those hardwood cuttings because you've
Mhm.
got this really strong wood and you're taking it while it's dormant, so there's just some other things to play there. So that one is definitely the more difficult of the three big categories. So
All right, that's enough of my dumb guy questions. So
no, those are good. Sometimes I forget, like I'm so used to doing them and they make me so happy and I get excited that I leave those steps out because those are inherent. I worked in a greenhouse in undergrad and I spent hours and weeks of my life just taking cuttings. So it's just kind of like lodged in my brain.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's
That's
muscle
something I
memory.
hadn't done as much as what you're talking about, like more of the winter type cuttings, on the herbaceous plants. I hadn't done as much as
Mhm.
that. Most of mine have been like woody stuff. I hadn't really thought about in those terms either, but yeah, I hadn't,
I
for
do
whatever reason.
Sphenodrenium
Mhm.
is a big one, and then you can actually take dahlia cuttings
Mm.
as well. And so
mm,
they're a different idea of how, when you think about cutting, you usually think about you're cutting off a branch, you're cutting through a stem.
Yeah.
These are technically cuttings, but you're kind of cutting it off the tubers itself, so you're cutting it
Mhm.
directly
Yeah.
from the growing point.
Gives it a good
And
start. Yeah, I bet. I
yeah,
bet.
yeah, and you get just more clones that way. So that's always nice when you need a certain color, like, or a bonsai, you need
Mm.
characteristics. So you can do it with your tomatoes too. You can take cuttings of your tomatoes and root those out. So if you've got a really great tomato, until you get to the seed point, you can do that as well. So that's an option for you. But so back to taking a cutting, the actual.
softwood taking and herbaceous taking cutting.
Right. So the
Timing
actual
is everything.
act of cutting through the stem.
Yeah.
So there is the best way to do it, and I will say that if you've ever taken cuttings, there'll be people who go, "Well, I don't do that," and it works. Well, there are easier things, like some things just root better than others with cuttings, but if you want to always have the best chance of root, the
Mhm.
best thing you can do is cut right under the node. And so
Mhm.
you will be applying the hormone and burying that node underground. And the reason that is important, so as a reminder, the node is where your leaves or a branch will come out. It's usually kind of a swollenish area. It kind of has this obvious line in a lot of plants that are visible, but where the leaves emerge.
That's what the really
So
one
it's
of the coolest things about plants there too, is that the cells are undifferentiated. Like they can
mhm.
that one stem cell, it could, or that one cell, I should say, it could become a stem or a root. So at that active growing point, meristematic area, the cells can become, and that's always kind of blown my mind. And if you can get that one concept in horticulture or botany down, you can play with that in so many cool ways. And it's such a neat area of a plant. Now, it's a neat function of a plant.
Yeah. So
A
that
feature of a
node
plant.
is where more of those undifferentiated cells are located. Yeah. So there are them throughout the plant because that's how it wards itself for disease and, damage and stuff. But the most amount of them are found in the node, which is why we want the node, because we want the most cells that can just do whatever they want, right? We're gonna tell them what to do by applying a hormone that is specific to rooting. And so we encourage those cells to become root cells rather than a leaf or a branch. So that is the number one way to have success, is by making a cutting, number one, at the proper time, which we've talked about, and at the proper place, which is right beneath the node. I would advise on the plant you're taking it from, so your mother plant of sorts, that you then cut that little inner stem area you left, cut that back to the node, the next node on the plant, if that makes sense. Just because that will encourage it to grow, and you're not leaving this little stub that's going to die back anyways, maybe have some other problems. So I try and do that.
Just in case anybody's kind of new to the plant physiology and you're having trouble imagining this, if you go out and look at a tree, like a tree branch, you will see there's a long section. There are often long sections where there's nothing going on. It's just literally like what we would call a stick. and then there's areas where leaves come out or flower buds come out, and that's the node. And so if you were going to take a cutting, you would not want to just cut it in the middle of that stick and stick the stick end in there. You would want to get the cut up closer to that node, node point. And you can go out and look at this in the backyard or wherever. Just go ahead and look. And that this is, again, in bonsai, we talk about internode length. We're trying to shrink that and make that smaller. But that internode space, there's very little chance that there's going to be roots coming out of that. And actually, what I do sometimes is a bit of a maverick here, Alexis. If I go off script, is I'll actually cut it close to the node on the mother plant. And then trim the stick off the cutting. So I don't know if you've ever heard
you
of
can
that.
Do that
do
too.
You ever,
either way.
In bonsai, do you ever leave a little
don't want the stick?
It's a stupid distinction, yeah.
You leave a little tail on there, I bet you. Sometimes, don't you, Brett? And scarify that, like you scratch it down to that little green layer.
Sometimes,
do you ever do that?
Sometimes
like an inch or so?
That would not be recommended for literally anything else besides weirdos who play with little
I heard
plants.
people talk about that in what you're saying, and I that was interesting to me.
Yeah,
they left a little tail,
creating an area that's dead and is not.
And they would get some root differentiation, minor amount there, but I didn't. I was like, oh, that must be something.
The idea is in nature, if a branch snaps off, sometimes it snaps off in the middle of the stick and it has to die back. We want to prevent that if we're, as horticulturists, because it gives the plant easier time of healing and of budding out from that site, etc. So don't cut the stick. Cut it at the node. Okay, I'm with you so far.
Right. Okay. So then, if that node that you plan to put underground and here's one of the important things on the semi hardwood or the softwood, those are interchangeable. The softwood makes more sense to me. On the softwood ones, you won't have this problem because you already have leaves on this plant, but this is very important in other and hardwoods and things like that. Make sure you're putting it cut side down into the soil. Don't flip it around. Plants do know which way is up. I mean, they grow towards the sun, right? They do know, and they do have, I forget what the word is called off the top of my head, but geotropic maybe, or something along those lines. They know. And if you bury the wrong end, it will not do anything. So make sure that you're putting your cut side down. And again, this can be more difficult when you're doing things without leaves. It's harder to tell, but anyway,
that sounds ridiculous, but it is very easy to do. It is very
easy.
Well, because if you've got a really long stem, so say you go out and you're cutting a big one, you're going to take 5 node cuttings off of this big long stem, but technically for some of them, both of your ends are cut, right? So like you got to make sure that you're paying attention to which side. And yes, it is very easy to do. Ask Brett and I how I know. How we know.
And when picking that new wood, I sometimes get the question, well, how do you know? How do you know? and I do use that snap test, and it's served me pretty well for most things. It's if I go out and I'm trying to time, because as Alexa said earlier, gosh, it's from, and Brett, we're talking about May to July. Well, how do you know within that time period when the perfect time is? I would go out, and if it's super flexible, super succulent, I don't necessarily want that. You don't want that super high water content, because I've been told that, and explained technically that doesn't have a lot of energy in that. It's so succulent. It's mainly water. As soon as you cut it, it's going to wilt. You're going to have failure. On the flip side of that, if you wait too long, it's going to be more lignous. The cells are already going to be differentiated. They're already going to be what they're going to be. The plant sort of locks into what it's going to be. So somewhere's in between, you need to identify that period. And that is when, roughly, on most plants that we're talking about for softwood cuttings, you would bend that, and if it snaps cleanly, that's perfect time. And that's I've held pretty true. If I bend it and it just keeps bending like a rubber band, it's not time. It's too soon. But if I try to bend it and it doesn't break, or it has a lot of resistance, I'm too late. But if you bend it and it snaps cleanly, perfect time. Now, I don't know, there's probably exceptions to that, but that's always worked really well for me, is the bend and snap test.
I mean, just think about the name that you're going with, right? It's called softwood, which means you don't want it too green, because that's not wood, right? It doesn't look like wood, but you don't want it to be hard. It's called softwood, and so that means it's flexible.
Mama Bear. This is Mama Bear.
I've done it too soon in the past. I was like, if it's really soft, it's going to be better, and it wasn't. And I was like, and I had to go back and look and be like, I was probably too soon on some of those things, Alexa. You made that mistake quite a bit.
Yeah, you want juvenile growth, which means this year's growth, but you want the leaves to be fully formed. So that's how you can know not to go too early. You want those leaves fully unfurled. They are not super soft. So you want that, and then the easiest way is to do is from tip cutting. So that means literally just the very tip of the plant. It's hard to go wrong. You may have to go down the stem a little bit, but if you go too far down the stem, you get that older growth.
Yeah.
So taking a tip cutting you can really hedge your bets that way.
If you're having trouble, do it in the mornings also, because that's the time when the turgid pressure or the water content of the plants at its highest. I mean, is there something to that? I mean, that's bound to, I've not.
We take in the floral world, and like when we talk about woody shrubs, like cutting them for cut flower production, predominantly we tell people to cut them in the morning because of that turgid pressure. The blooms are at the most hydration at that time. So it's also cool and all these other things, but one of the big ones is the water content.
Well, I tend to think, we're throwing a lot of variables at you. And the reason why is because there are some different things that you can optimize. But I also think plants want to propagate.
Live.
There's a reason. I mean, like, and if you think about why these plants might do this, in some cases, it's because the plant might fall over, and then its node is in the contact with the ground, and then it can root out from there and become a plant that's in a better situation than it would have been when it flipped over. Like, that's what happens with brambles too. Where it goes out. And so, like, I think that you can shoot for best circumstances, but there is a window of time. There's some, plants can be forgiving. They can also be punishing, but they can also be forgiving with some of this stuff, especially like, I think, and I would echo what you said, Alexis, like my take rates are way higher the closer I am to the tip that I take them from. I don't know if there's an apical thing. I don't know if it's just the freshest whatever available, but I would agree with that. I've had higher success from stuff when
the auxins are traveling towards that terminal end, so that makes sense. I mean, the natural hormones are highest towards that terminal end, so makes sense.
Yep. And it's that more juvenile growth, which is ideal. So so you go out, and to Brett's point, our job is to tell you the perfect situation, so that when you can flex those however that makes sense from a timing standpoint or a whatever. But like if we tell you the perfect circumstance, and you can flex it a little bit. So we go out, we take our cutting, and we've got just our node there, and then we're going to make sure we strip any leaves or extra foliage that we are going to put below the soil surface. Is the number one thing. And really, we don't want a ton of leaves, because remember, this cutting has no roots. And so roots are what take water up to give to the leaves. So we don't want a lot of leaves putting a lot of pressure on that stem to need water, and them respiring and do all these things. But we need enough leaves that it's going to photosynthesize. So it's a kind of a delicate balance there. I, in general, like as a rule of thumb, try to leave no more than about 2 leaves. And if they're really, really large leaves, like, say they're the size of my palm, I will actually cut those leaves maybe in half. So I'll still have 2, but I'll cut off some of them.
Are you cutting across the leaf or down the leaf? How are you cutting that, Alexis?
Usually just across. I'm just like grabbing them and giving them a haircut, basically.
Trying to just keep that from losing so much moisture, you said?
Yes. Losing so much moisture and not asking so much of that stem while it doesn't even have roots. So then you're left with this little stem. You got your little node at the bottom. You got your leaves that have had a haircut, roughly 2. If there are any bloom buds or even leaf buds, I tend to take those off. Because again, those are needy structures. They take up a lot of food, they take up a lot of water, and we ain't got no roots, baby. So we take those off. Just pinch them off with your fingers is fine. Make sure you have clean tools and clean hands when you do this as well. We don't want to introduce any bacteria to that fresh cut.
So no garden soil, I'm assuming.
What?
I said no native garden soil.
Yeah,
and you said no contamination. I was like, oh, that's a no, I bet. Yeah.
And this is definitely a do what I say, not as I do, which is probably why some of my cuttings die, because I don't wash my hands or snips as often as I should.
Your 70% isopropyl is not sitting there handy. Yeah.
Yes, but if I was doing this and being paid to do it for somebody else, I would be cleaning my snips pretty often throughout that. So we've got our little stem with its haircut leaves, and then we are going to dip that cut end pretty quickly. We don't want to wait. We don't want this to air dry. So fairly quickly after you cut it, you're going to dip it in some type of hormone. So there's multiple ones out there for a softwood or herbaceous cuttings. Just the standard, if you Google rooting hormone or you go to your box store, you can buy rooting hormone. Generally, whatever they've got on the shelf is going to be just fine for what you want to use. Once we get into hardwoods, we get a little bit more intense and a little bit more specific. But like I have seen the most success with just the pretty much the cheapest rooting hormone you can buy for any of these. So you're going to dip that cut end into the rooting hormone, and then you'll place it in the media. So let's talk about media. Do you all have a?
Well, can I get one thing real quick on the rooting hormone? If you are a dork, so there's different levels of strength of rooting hormone, and Alexis mentioned that. But they actually, a lot of the companies, they will have a species list that has these are the recommended levels for that particular thing. And so the high strength ones, that's an indicator this is something that's challenging to root.
Really got to push.
If you're trying to set a PR for most difficult plants to root, it'll be on that list. So if you're wanting a little bit of extra confirmation that this is the right one, usually either in the pack or online, they'll have a list of the different species and match.
And I will say for a lot of woody cuttings, a minimum of 1,000 parts per million is what you're looking for. So you can get away with probably 90% of what you need of this for with 1,000 parts per million. You can go higher, but that'll be a good place to start.
All right, media. Sorry.
Yes, no, that's good. Do you all have any preferences on media you use for rooting?
Immediately, something with no fertilizer in it. I see that cause a lot of problems. A lot of potting soil is, I mean, they love to add value. Let's, I guess, put it nicely, add value by putting in some kind of slow release fertilizer. And that's a no. I've had a lot of burn in the past with that.
Yeah, no fertilizer for sure.
No fertilizers, but I find that if you go, and it's readily available at most box stores now, you can go and get the small bag mixes that are specifically for starting seeds, and that almost never has fertilizer in it. It's a finer mix. Now you can add some amendments to lighten that up, but I start with something like that, Alexis, because it's kind of hard. It's to find something that doesn't have fertilizer in it sometimes, because a lot of the stuff does. So watch out for that.
Yes, good, very good point, Ray. What about you, Brett? What do you like to use?
Well, so I personally find for me in general, moisture causes more problems than it does solutions, or like, water is life, but water is
a little
death.
easier to give something moisture than to take it away.
Yeah, and so it's definitely for me a significantly more well draining mix than I would use for like seed starting or potting up a house plant or something that has established roots. And there's some stuff with, again, I keep coming back to the bonsai world, but they'll do like some crazy loose mixes where it's like just straight up sand,
almost like
like
bark and sand.
large particle size sand, or really fine particle perlite or something like that, where it's like it's weird because you're kind of crossing over with the rooting. You're kind of crossing over into this almost like hydroponic space as opposed to the seed starting of your tomato plant, where at least that's been my experience, that
I will say
it stays
that
too wet,
for
it'll rot.
hardwoods especially, that the more drainage the better, and for softwoods you're kind of right in the middle of between those. So for herbaceous cuttings, a regular old potting soil, which is peat, vermiculite, perlite, is going to be great. And for probably most of your softwood cuttings, you would be fine with just that. But I prefer to either do solid vermiculite, which is that shiny substance, or if that's unavailable, because sometimes that's hard to find for people, or it can be expensive as well, and you don't want to reuse that too much. So I actually like, for softwood cuttings, a potting soil that I add a lot more perlite, which is the white substance too. So I get the benefit of a little more water holding from that peat that's in that potting soil, but I get a lot of aeration, which is what we want, a lot of drainage by adding. So I'll do like roughly one part potting soil to 2 parts perlite.
2 parts.
And
Gotcha.
and put that in a mix. Yeah. And it does kind of, depend a little bit. You could probably do 1-to-1 ratio as well.
But when I've done it, some though,
it ends up looking. I described. So this is actually the mix that I grow my, or almost identical mix that I grow my pre-bonsai trees in when I'm trying to develop cool, crazy roots and stuff. And I described it as dirty perlite. It looks kind of like dirty, more so than black with a couple of perlite pieces sprinkled in. It's more like white with the dirt of the
chromic sprinkled in.
I've seen that almost on everything. They say add perlite, even if you're using like the seed starting mix I mentioned. You would definitely add something to that because it's a seed starting mix. It's finely ground. You would, and almost all the notes that I've read or the books I've seen is a 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 or even greater, like you're talking about, Brett, even a ratio.
Yeah, a full commercial level, they'll probably use only perlite or only vermiculite or only sand, depending on what they're rooting. But I think for like the average person, or even the plant inclined person, you need a little bit more flexibility, which is where that peat comes in.
It's not your full-time job to monitor these cuttings.
Correct, right, exactly. You don't have like monitors out the wazoo.
Exactly.
Stuff. Yeah. So that would be my recommendation for your media. So you put your media into, you can pretty much use any type of cell or flat that you want to use. You just want to make sure that it's deep enough that you can bury 1 or 2 of your nodes underground or under your soil media, and then it's not going to like touch the very bottom of your tray, because you want some media below that for the roots to go into. But pretty much anything with drainage will do. And then one really important thing, again, some people are going to say they don't do this, but and again, sometimes I do it and sometimes I don't, and I do see a difference, especially when you're doing softwood or something like hardwood, where you need to kind of nail it. You need a dibble. What is a dibble? A dibble is your finger, a pencil, a little rod, a little wooden rod,
like a big Sharpie.
Anything like whatever you're gonna.
Brett. I thought you said jerky. I was like, what kind of animal are you?
He dips his jerky in
his my Slim Jim jerky, and I was like, what kind of animal are you? What? I was like, I am so confused right now.
Slim Jim.
I usually use whatever I'm using to write my plant tags with. So my pencil
just a
or
number 2 pencil. I just
Yeah. So you're going to use that to make a little hole so that when you insert your cutting, you're not washing away all of your rooting hormone, right? You want that hormone to stay on that cut end. And so you make that little dibble, you put it down in there till it's kind of firm, and you firm that in to your soil mix or media mix. Does that sound
Yeah.
good? Makes sense?
I virtually never do cutting. I'll do cutting, like do cuttings in individual cells. I will almost always do them in like a bunch, like in a small flat or something like that, and let those. For me, I let those, a lot of that foliage kind of be close to each other, so it helps to maintain a little bit of the humidity around. It makes a little forest that holds
little
on to that
microclimate,
humidity a little bit better.
Humidity is really important.
And but the point being, like we're used to, sometimes people are used to seed starting where you got individual cells and each one has its own, and you got a pretty good, whatever. With, you don't have to do that. You could take a whole bunch of cuttings and do them create a little mat. It looks like a tray of microgreens or something. Anyway,
yeah. There's lots of ways. It just kind of depends what you want to deal with down the road and what you are able to deal with now. So if humidity is a problem for you, clustering them is good. But if you usually have high humidity, then you don't necessarily need to do that. And so, and then you don't have to deal with your roots, separating your roots out later. So we've got our cutting in our media in whatever form or fashion, and now we have to grow it on for a while. And so softwood cuttings can take where a herbaceous cutting can take a couple weeks, a softwood cutting can take a couple months.
4 to 6 weeks at least.
Yeah. So it really just depends on there's a lot of a lot of things that can play a part, but don't be expecting it to root in 2 weeks like you would. Also, for softwood, typically we want them actually in a little bit more of a shaded area, because when we're taking these cuttings in the spring, it's about to get hot for most of us, right? In the summer, we don't want those cuttings to be experiencing any more stress than they have to. And so we actually tend to shade them, put them, I put mine under like a greenhouse bench, or if you put them inside, you can do that where there's near a window, but they're still getting light, but it's not harsh sunlight.
That's a tough thing.
The other reason is
bright but not direct. That's what you're saying, I guess.
Yeah, bright but not direct.
I know that sometimes that's tough for people, especially if you're using a humidity tent. Ask me how I know.
That was my next thing.
But I felt that you were going that direction. So my gosh,
so you need to give them some sort of humidity. And so even in a greenhouse situation where they're being shaded, they'll often put some sort of humidity dome, or you could put them in a clear plastic bag. But all that to say, if you got them out in too much sunlight, then they're going to just, bake in there, right? They're going to shrivel up. So you don't want to do that. So you'll put them under, in some shade somewhere. Make sure that media that you put them in is consistently moist, which is why that high drainage is important, because it's going to stay kind of wet, but those particles are so big that there's enough air in there. So you want that to stay wet, and you're going to leave that humidity on for at least a month, maybe 2, that humidity dome or that bag, whatever you're using to create this like mini greenhouse atmosphere.
Are you using bottom heat for this process too, or did I just jump ahead?
It depends on what it is. Usually if you're doing them in the summer, like where they're coming into the summer months, if you've got them outside in the shade, that is enough warmth that they're going to be fine. As long as we don't get cold. As long as it doesn't drop below like 65 degrees at night, they're going to be great outside. If you're going to move them inside the house, put them on a heat mat.
That's typically around 80 degrees or something, which isn't...
72 depends, would be, it kind of depends, but I would say like 70 to 72.
Some of them, the good ones, you can set the temperature on, but the ones that are preset are 75, 80. And I've heard greenhouse people call that, ones that are doing like large quantity of these, even our local associate or big commercial greenhouse, they call it, what is it? Warm feet, cool head. And that's how they train people. Is that I guess, like you said, and that's in a controlled environment, it's got to be 75 degrees or so at the roots, and then cooler up top.
Back to our discussion on perlite versus dirty perlite versus something else. If you add a heat mat, you are increasing the rate that the water is going to evaporate.
Yes,
meaning you've got to keep an eye on them to keep them moist enough.
Rot will be a problem.
I've had good success with both, with and without the heat mat, but with the heat mat, you gotta be paying a little more attention.
Are you using in your scenario, Brett? Are you using a dome or some kind of covering You are okay.
It like depends on how big it is. If it's something relatively small, I'll just take a Ziploc
or
bag
something,
and
like
like
a
a
gallon
gallon or
bag.
2-gallon bag and just put it over it.
So you're using that too.
And I
for your
do
process.
periodically kind of like take that off and let everything kind of breathe for a little while.
When I
and
see
then
those
put it
big
back
drips
on.
starting to mist is fine on the inside of the bag, but I get nervous when I start to see the big drops starting to condense and drop down.
Big drop.
That's when the big drops. You don't want that. Then I'm propping edges, or depending on what the material is, I'm ventilating that thing.
Yes.
That is my breaking point. I'm like, I'm gonna rot.
You do want a little bit of ventilation, even if it's again, it depends on how often you have to water, but like, maybe you take your dome off to water and you leave that dome off for just a couple minutes, just enough for you to get some water. Maybe you water everything else. And then before you finish, you pop that dome back on, every other day or something like that. So you want very high humidity, but to Ray's perfect point, you don't want big fat raindrops. You just want a light mist, a little fog in there.
I like that fog. Yeah. Fogged up. That's the perfect way to put it. Yeah. And you just want to look foggy.
Yeah, and then you just wait. And so I would say, like, at a month, you might kind of check to, give them just the slightest little tug, just little as possible. See if you feel any resistance. Hopefully you do feel even just a little bit, and then you just put that dome back on, and then you let them go. So looking at the Weigela and almond cuttings I did last year, which I think are pretty good examples of, softwood cuttings. I took them in June after they bloomed, and they were rooted and ready to pot up by, I think my tag said around August. And then, yes, they were because
you took them when, did you say?
In June, early June.
Okay.
Right after they bloomed. They bloomed around, or the Weigela bloomed around Mother's Day. So then I took them early June, which is about 2 weeks after they bloomed. Blooms were done. And then, so I potted them up around mid-August or so. And then they were ready. And because I gave Brett a rooted cutting in in a nice size pot mid-September. So, that gives you kind of an idea of what those look like. And now they're coming back to life because they're still in those little pots that I potted them up in August of last year. And so the ones that I didn't give away, I still have, and they're now starting to leaf out, and they're still in their little pots. And so at this point, I'll probably be able to plant them outside. So basically, I took cuttings last June, and I will probably plant them this, April, May. So almost a full year, could probably go a full year or a year and a half, because they are still quite small. But I'm going to give them a little extra TLC.
Depending on how what you're doing your cuttings into, there's not really a rush to get them out. I think sometimes people get more impatient and they, could go a little longer. I mean, if you're more experienced and you can do that, and if you can get a plant into its own pot, it's going to have more room. It's not competing for resources. It's going to grow faster, period. But there's also, I have had cuttings that I took in June and I just let them rock until the following spring, just as cuttings growing, and they grew together a little bit, but I'm doing a bunch of root work and stuff on a lot of them anyway. But so, I mean, like there is that too. Some of them will be like, I don't even know if these took, and then I forget about them, and then I come back and I'm like,
and they're fine.
They made it.
They're good. They're good.
And the ones that I was like,
about, I just don't want to baby them
the other ones I was babying and keep paying attention to all died. The ones that I just grew out, and it was like whatever. Yeah.
So if you're wondering what you can take cuttings from, make sure it's not a patented plant. We have to tell you that, so that you can take cuttings from it. But really, if it's a softwood, you should be able to take a cutting from it. And you can experiment a little bit about what's going on and what's in there. One of the books I recommend that I actually have opened for this episode is from the American Horticulture Society, and it's literally called Plant Propagation. And this one is an oldie, but a goodie. Plants have been propagating the same way for many, many years. And it is great photos, really great description, much better than I could ever probably tell you on a podcast. But highly recommend that book. There's a lot of them out there that you can look up a lot of stuff online. We do have some publications we can link as well. But it really is simple, and I think once you do it once or twice, you'll nail it. My one tip is take 3 times as many as you
Yeah.
actually want.
I
Like
was gonna say
literally at least 3.
10 times.
Yeah. 10
Yeah. The
3
more the
because if you're
better.
limited on space, 10 if you just wanna make sure you have plenty.
If you want
And that's
one
I do that as someone who's experienced, I always take a bunch.
if you want one and you take 1 cutting, it will die. If you
Yes.
want one and you take 10 cuttings, they will all
10
survive.
will live.
Yeah. And then you can make and give them to your friends. So,
That's right.
you'll be the most popular person. It's a
What
win-win
For
either
plant
way.
swaps and stuff, it's so much fun doing this. And one
Yeah.
plant, I mean, because plant stock is very expensive. If you have an heirloom plant or a plant that's off patent, man, it's so cool that you can get 20 plants from even cuttings from one small plant. I mean, and if you are careful, like Brett was saying earlier, and you cut down to the next nearest growing point, it doesn't hurt the plant, the parent plant, the mother plant, but so cool. So cool.
It's a
one
good way
question
to
that
prune your plant too. Like,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
yeah.
pruning it and taking cuttings at the same time.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
Win-win.
the thing that gets me into trouble is I'll prune stuff and I'll be like, I can't just let this die. I
Oh,
need
so
to
you're trying to
turn
use the
all of it into
prunings, yeah.
cuttings because I need
yeah.
more potted plants to take care of. Absolutely,
You need
that's what
more
I need.
anxiety in your life. Yes, I need
But
some more responsibilities. Yes.
well, one other thing we sort of talked about it, but talking about taking new growth that's
Mhm.
juvenile but's ready and it's hardened off and it's kind of ready to roll. As far as size of cuttings, like the actual
Yeah.
size
Good
of the
point. Mhm.
stem, any thoughts on that?
It's kind of plant dependent. I base it more on the stage of what, like we were saying, you're trying to balancing, and different size or different plants have different size stems at appropriate
Mm-hmm.
timing. So I base it
Yeah.
more on the maturity of the material I'm working with.
The one,
Did you have
Yeah, and
something specific in
you
mind
don't
for
want
you,
too
Brett?
many
Maybe different.
leaves. Yeah, you
Yeah,
don't want too many leaves. I like to bury at least, in a perfect
couple
world, in the
nodes.
perfect cutting. I like to, you've got your node that has the rooting hormone, and then ideally I'm going to bury a second node, the one next higher, because I still might get some root growth. I'll get later on from there, and then I
mm-hmm.
got a really happy plant. So that's 2, and then ideally I would like to have 2 above ground for leaf and branch growth down the road. So like 4, if I had 4 would be the minimum if in a perfect world. But for a lot of plants that are easy to root, you just need 1 above and 1 below, and you're good to go. But 4 would be where I usually go. Any more than that, I start to worry. I'm sure that I'm an over worrier when it comes to stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I tend to like take off more leaves than I probably should, and that kind of stuff. But
I
I want
think
them
for
as little stress as possible.
the thing that I've experienced is you start to get greedy about trying to accelerate the process of having a big plant by
Mhm.
trying to
Oh
use
yeah,
cuttings that are too big
Too
or
big. Yeah.
they're too lignified, they're too in some cases it's
yeah.
not even going to work at all because it's too old. But
Mhm.
I think in general, not to say that you need to do the teeny tiniest little cuttings, but the younger and therefore smaller cuttings usually
Mhm.
have a higher take rate. If you want to take a bunch of different styles, and
Mhm.
this is
Different
what I did.
sizes.
I tried some that were because I want things to have a thick trunk fast, or be able to grow big fast, and it just your take rate's gonna be your success rate's gonna
It's
be a
fun to
little
play
lower.
around with. I mean, the number one thing is if you have not done anything like this, just know that you can do it, and go and look up top 5 easiest plants. At the top of everyone's going to be hydrangea, probably. And there's some other easy ones that Alexis and Brett mentioned, but just look up something like that. Find ones that you have the highest likelihood of success, and go out and just try it.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the basic information that we gave you today. And I think you'll be
Mhm.
surprised in a lot of situations. You're going to have some success. And that's so encouraging when you have that cloned plant of the parent plant. And, you know, it's just kind of a really cool thing.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I love about propagation, and I'm imagining it in this case, is that if you have like a tree or a bush or something that has like some sort of sentimental value for you or your family.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, people do this with house plants and stuff too. And like, let's say it's reaching the end of its lifespan, or it's going to need to go for one reason or another. You're able to like recreate that in a way that can be either shared with other people. So like, that parents give in to their kids of like, this is a cutting from this place that from where you grew up, and you can plant it at your new house, or that type of thing. It's just really, really cool.
I've had to do that before, Brett, and that is so neat. And when you explain to people, now listen, this is not like the parent plant. It's exactly the parent plant, and that's really cool. You're bringing that plant forward with you. I've done that with like red twig dogwoods and some lilacs and some other things. Even the regular dogwood I got to wear. But it's so cool when you can't take that plant with you, and if it's a memorial plant or something. Yeah, it's super cool.
Yeah,
it's a good thing.
Had to finish us on a sentimental note.
It's a good one, Brett.
As Alexis gets to talk science the whole time and is just jacked about it.
Meristematic activity.
I freaking love talking about this stuff. But if you've got questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Shoot us an email. You can follow us on Instagram. I am going to do better at keeping up with that. If you've not seen posts, it's me. I'm the problem. Hello. But we're working on that. Please feel free to send us an email or reach out to us in another way. If you've got questions on taking cuttings or plants in general, if it's nerd stuff like that, I love to answer it. So please, you are not bothering us if you want to ask questions about it. But yeah, anything else I'm forgetting, guys?
I don't think so.
Wonderful. Nope. Well, we thank you guys for being with us today, and we hope you'll join us next time. And don't forget, we'll cover more about cuttings later in the fall, so don't miss out on those. But, any of the cool stuff we have coming up between now and then. We'll see you later.